My ex slipped a GPS tracker under my car, texting my exact routes as a joke. When I tried to stand up for myself, he chuckled and said, "Can't stalk what's worthless." I walked away. That was 5 months ago. Yesterday, a judge read the evidence, and he went gray before the handcuffs clicked. When me and my boyfriend Nate broke up in July, I thought I was finally free. It's not like he was toxic or anything. We mainly just had different senses of humor. For example, I laugh at anything that involves babies being silly or animals just being animals. Meanwhile, he'll only laugh at the expense of others, especially at mine. For example, on my 21st birthday, he told me he was having an affair. We had a 2-hour-long conversation about why he did it, who he did it with, and how he kept it a secret for a whole year. It was only when I was in tears, rocking back and forth, that he finally admitted he was joking. And as he spent my birthday clutching his stomach, rolling around on the floor laughing, I spent it in tears, curled up into a ball in the corner of his room. Things were never the same after that, but I loved him. So we stayed together for another year before finally breaking up. We met on Bumble and didn't have any mutual friends, so it was mostly a tidy breakup, except for one thing. Nate was a very reckless spender, and during our relationship, a lot of his money was spent on wooing me. Flowers, designer dresses, shoes, everything. So when he reached out at the start of April asking if I could loan him money to help pay his taxes, I wasn't even surprised. I remember reading his notification and rolling my eyes, but it was only $2,000, a fraction of what he'd spent on me, so I sent it. He thanked me, and I was honestly happy to never speak to him again. But the next day, he sent me a video of him inside a bright green Lambo, with Travis Scott playing. His friend grabbed the phone and started shouting at the top of his lungs, "Yo, Meg, you're the GOAT for renting this car for us!" A wave of disgust combined with nausea washed over me. That was a chunk of my savings, wasted on some prank. The next day, when he had sobered up, I told him I was never sending him money again. But just before I could block him, he started typing. He apologized and said he'd never pull some BS again. I didn't respond. I just blocked him. Everything. His main account, his spam, his Snapchat, WhatsApp, his family, his little friends, everything. No more Nate. And immediately, a knot that had been stuck in my stomach was undone. But it was still hard. It took months for me to be able to cry without feeling scared of someone laughing at me, to trust what others told me without feeling like I was being pranked. And just when I started to feel good, guess what happened? He emailed me. And if there's anyone who can push my buttons well, it's Nate. Because within 10 minutes, I had gone from healed to listening to Nate's apologies and getting butterflies all over again. But one thing had changed. I was smarter. So when he asked to meet up, I agreed, because I trusted myself not to act on any feelings. Of course, looking back, I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. But I guess sometimes you really do have to learn a lesson 1,000 times before it sticks. It started off pretty sweet. He was wearing the same outfit he wore when we were 18. I got in his car, and he was playing the same song he was playing when I got in it the first time. He even pulled out my chair for me before I sat down, or so I thought, before I realized it was just another trick. Because he did the thing where you pull it out as the person is going to sit down, and they fall on the floor. As I fell on the carpet, he chuckled. But instead of making the joke last 10 minutes, he helped me up straight away and even said sorry. So I went out with him again, and again. And by the third date, I remembered exactly why we broke up. I showed him the bikinis I wanted to order for summer. And with no hesitation, he said, "Well, you're not Margot Robbie, and those bikinis won't change that, but order them if you want." I smiled weakly, not wanting to ruin our good day by getting upset, but he kept going. Now that we're on the topic, you could definitely stand to lose at least 15 pounds BTW. Like, damn. Still, I stared at the ground, stoic, nonchalant. Like, do you have zero empathy? I have to look at you every day, and you can't even go to the gym for a few hours a week? Well, that broke me. Snot ran down from my nose to my mouth. I cried so hard my hair got frizzy, and the harder I cried, the more he laughed. I didn't even notice he had his phone out the whole time. I just walked out and finally decided I was done. Reblocked him on everything. Every organ in my body felt numb, empty. And when I got home, all I had the energy to do was lie in bed, doom scroll, and eat some Ben & Jerry's. That's when a TikTok video came up. It was me, crying on Nate's bed, edited with a clown filter over my face and sad violin music playing in the background. The caption read, "When she thinks being mid means she deserves respect." It got 40,000 views. But this time, I was the one laughing. Not because I wasn't embarrassed, I was. Not because I wasn't extremely heartbroken, I absolutely was. But because Nate thought he could do whatever he wanted, with zero consequences, which meant he would never see me coming. I spent that whole night making a list of every cruel prank, every humiliation, every time he'd lied to me or about me. I needed to be methodical. This wasn't going to be some petty revenge. I wanted him to understand exactly how it felt to be on the receiving end of his jokes. By morning, my notepad was filled with incidents that, when viewed all together, painted a disturbing pattern of emotional manipulation that I had somehow normalized over the years. The next morning, I created a new email account and reached out to his boss, Marissa. During our relationship, Nate had mentioned she was super strict about employee behavior on social media. I sent her the link to his TikTok and pointed out how unprofessional it was to publicly humiliate someone. I didn't identify myself as his ex. I just said I was concerned about the company's reputation being associated with someone who treats women this way. While waiting for that to play out, I contacted a few of his friends' girlfriends. Not all of them, just the ones who had always been nice to me. I showed them the video and asked if their boyfriends were involved in planning it. None of them knew about it, and they were genuinely appalled. Turned out Nate had been telling his friends I was psycho and obsessed with him since our breakup. One of the girlfriends even shared screenshots of group chats where he'd been spreading lies about me for months. 3 days later, my friend Shannon texted me that Nate had deleted the TikTok. I checked from my roommate's phone and saw he'd scrubbed his entire account. Later that day, he emailed me again, but this time there was no charm, just anger. He asked why I was trying to ruin his life, and said his boss had given him a formal warning about online conduct. I didn't respond. This was just the beginning. I wasn't out to destroy him. I just wanted him to experience the consequences of his actions for once, and I wanted to make sure he'd think twice before humiliating another woman after me. For too long, I had been the butt of his jokes, but now the tables were turning, and justice, however small, was finally within reach. I should have known that deleting the TikTok wouldn't be the end of it. Nate was never one to back down when when his ego was bruised. 3 days after his angry email, I was scrolling through Instagram when I noticed something strange. A bunch of my coworkers had suddenly followed me. Weird, since most of us kept our work and social media lives separate. Then my phone started blowing up with text messages. Is that really you? OMG Meg, why would you post that? Are you okay? Do you need to talk? My stomach dropped. I didn't even need to check what they were talking about. I just knew Nate was behind it. With shaking hands, I opened Instagram and saw dozens of new DMs from coworkers, acquaintances, even a few relatives I barely spoke to. Someone had created a fake Instagram account in my name with my photos, but the bio read, "Just a desperate girl looking for attention and money from my exes." The most recent post was a badly photoshopped picture of me sitting on a pile of cash with the caption, "Another day, another man to scam. Who wants to be next?" The account had tagged everyone from my workplace, including my boss, Rebecca. I immediately reported the account and texted my closest work friend, Taylor, explaining it was fake. She called me right away. "Everyone knows it's not you," she reassured me. "It's so obviously fake that Rebecca already sent an email telling people not to engage with it." I felt a wave of relief followed by rage. Nate was really trying to mess with my job now? Two could play at that game. I didn't respond to his provocation directly. That's what he wanted. Instead, I took screenshots of everything and documented all of it, including his previous TikTok. I was building a case. The fake Instagram was taken down within 24 hours, but the damage to Nate's reputation among my friends was permanent. Taylor and a few other coworkers who'd met him during our relationship now saw exactly what kind of person he was. Word spread quickly. A week passed without incident. I was starting to relax, thinking maybe he'd gotten the message. Then I came home from work to find a delivery guy outside my apartment building with an enormous order of pizzas, 20 of them, all with different toppings, all paid for in advance, all supposedly ordered by me. "I didn't order these," I told the confused delivery guy. He showed me the order details. Someone had used my full name, address, and even included a note saying I was throwing a surprise party and to please knock loudly because I might be in the shower. The total came to over $400. I explained the situation, and thankfully, the delivery guy was understanding. He called his manager, who reluctantly agreed not to charge me. As he was loading the pizzas back into his car, I noticed a text from an unknown number. "Dinner's served. Hope you're hungry." This might sound silly compared to the Instagram thing, but it really rattled me. Nate knew where I lived. He had my address. For the first time, I felt genuinely unsafe. That night, I called my older brother, Chris. He lived across town and had never liked Nate. He'd seen through him from day one. I told him everything that had happened, and he came over immediately to help me change the locks on my apartment door. We also installed a basic security camera that connected to my phone. It wasn't much, but it made me feel safer. "You should file a police report," Chris suggested as we tested the new locks. "This is harassment." I sighed. "With what evidence? A TikTok he already deleted? A fake Instagram account that's gone? Some pizzas I didn't order? They'll laugh me out of the station." Chris frowned. "Then at least document everything. Screenshots, dates, times. If this escalates, you'll need proof it's been ongoing." I followed his advice and created a detailed log of everything Nate had done. I also reached out to a few of his exes before me, women he'd mentioned during our relationship. I found 2 of them on Facebook and sent careful messages explaining who I was and asking if they'd experienced similar behavior. I wasn't expecting much, honestly. These were cold contacts from years ago, but within a day, both had responded, and the stories they told made my blood run cold. Olivia, who dated Nate in college, told me he'd convinced her she had an STD, letting her panic for days before revealing it was just a joke. Zoe shared that he'd once logged into her email account and canceled a job interview she'd been preparing for weeks, just to watch her meltdown when she got rejected. It was like looking at my own experiences through a mirror. The same patterns, the same cruelty disguised as humor, the same devastation left in his wake. "We should start a support group," Zoe joked when we moved our conversation to a group chat. That gave me an idea. Not a support group exactly, but strength in numbers. If one person complaining to his boss had made him delete the TikTok, what could 3 of us do? Over the next few days, we shared information: where he worked, his social media accounts, mutual connections. None of us wanted to ruin his life as he'd accused me of trying to do. We just wanted him to stop, to face consequences, to think twice before hurting someone else. Olivia, who worked in HR, suggested we document all the incidents and present them to his company's human resources department as a pattern of harassment. Zoe, now a small business owner, thought we should focus on warning others in our social circles. Both were good ideas, but I was worried about potential blowback. Nate was unpredictable when cornered. Before we could decide on a plan, Nate escalated again. I was at work when I got a call from my credit card company asking if I'd authorized several large purchases. Someone had tried to charge over $5,000 to my card at an electronics store. The fraud department had flagged it because it was so out of character for my spending pattern. "Did you give your card information to anyone recently?" the representative asked. I hadn't, but Nate had my card number from when we were dating. I'd never thought to get a new card after the breakup because why would I? He'd never shown interest in my money before. In fact, he'd always insisted on paying for everything. I canceled the card immediately and ordered a replacement. When I got home that night, I checked my email and found 3 subscription confirmations for various adult websites, all using my work email address. I spent hours canceling them and changing all my passwords, feeling violated all over again. That was the final straw. The next morning, I called in sick to work and went to the police station. The officer who took my report looked bored as I explained the situation, but perked up when I mentioned the credit card fraud attempt. "That's actually something we can investigate," he said, suddenly more interested. "The rest is complicated without direct threats, but financial fraud leaves a trail." I left the station with an official report number and slightly more hope than I'd had going in. At least there was a record now. At least someone in authority knew what was happening. When I checked my phone, I had a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Think you're clever going to the cops? That just made this more fun. Game on, Meg." My hands shook as I showed the text to Chris, who had come with me to the station. Only Nate called me Meg, and he knew I hated it when he used the nickname Meggie. "We're getting you a new phone number today," Chris said firmly, "and you're staying at my place until this blows over." I didn't argue. For the next week, I lived out of a duffel bag at my brother's apartment, going to work and coming straight back, always looking over my shoulder. I felt like a prisoner, but at least I was safe. Olivia, Zoe, and I continued continued our group chat, now with a new sense of urgency. They helped me brainstorm ways to protect myself while also holding Nate accountable. Olivia had a friend who worked at the same company as Nate and confirmed that the warning from his boss had actually put him on thin ice. He had previous complaints in his file that I'd known nothing about. That gave me an idea. If Nate was already in trouble at work, maybe that was the leverage we needed. Not to get him fired, that wasn't the goal, but to get him to back off. Zoe suggested we all write formal emails to his company's HR department, detailing our experiences with dates, screenshots, and specifics. Not as a coordinated attack, but as individual women reporting a pattern we'd discovered through connecting with each other. Keep it professional, Olivia advised. No emotions, just facts. Companies care about liability, not feelings. We spent a weekend crafting our emails, helping each other strike the right tone. I included the police report number from the credit card fraud attempt, which gave my claims more weight. After sending the emails, we waited. For 3 days, nothing happened. No new harassment from Nate, no response from the company. I started to think maybe our emails had gone to spam or been dismissed. Then on Thursday, I got a LinkedIn message from a woman named Jordan, who identified herself as the director of HR at Nate's company. She asked if I would be willing to have a phone conversation about my email. I agreed, and we set up a call for that afternoon. Jordan was professional but sympathetic. She explained that they had received all 3 of our emails and were taking them seriously. Nate had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. We can't discuss specific employment actions with non-employees, she said carefully, but I wanted you to know that we don't tolerate this kind of behavior, and we're addressing it. I thanked her, surprised by how emotional I felt. For so long, Nate's behavior had been dismissed or minimized. Having it taken seriously by his employer felt validating in a way I hadn't expected. That evening, I got another email from Nate. The subject line was simply, "Stop. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you've crossed a line." He wrote, "They suspended me because of your lies. Is that what you wanted? To ruin my career over a few jokes? You're going to regret this." I forwarded the email to Jordan without comment, then blocked his email address again. The threat made my skin crawl, but I refused to let him intimidate me anymore. The next day, Chris and I returned to my apartment to pick up more of my clothes. As we approached my door, I noticed something odd. The new security camera we'd installed was missing. The mount was still there, but the camera itself was gone. "Did you move it?" Chris asked, frowning. I shook my head, my heartbeat accelerating. We cautiously entered the apartment, checking every room to make sure no one was inside. Nothing seemed disturbed, except for one thing. My bed had been made. I never made my bed before leaving. "We need to leave right now," Chris said quietly. We hurried out, and Chris called the police from the car. They came and took another report, but without signs of forced entry, there wasn't much they could do. I had no proof it was Nate. He'd been careful not to leave evidence. The officer suggested maybe my landlord had entered for maintenance, but a quick call confirmed they hadn't been in my unit. I felt violated all over again. He'd been in my home, touched my things. The thought made me sick. It seems Nate still had my spare key from when we were dating. I never thought to ask for it back since we broke up amicably at first. "You can't stay there anymore," Chris insisted. "It's not safe." I knew he was right, but I couldn't live on my brother's couch forever. I needed a long-term solution. That night, I called my landlord and explained the situation. To my surprise, he was understanding and agreed to let me break my lease without penalty if I moved out within 2 weeks. It would stretch my finances thin, but my safety was worth it. While I searched for a new place, far from my current apartment, I got an unexpected call from Jake, Nate's friend who had been in the Lamborghini video. He sounded uncomfortable. "Look, I know we're not friends or anything, but I thought you should know Nate's been talking about getting even with you. Like, serious revenge stuff. He's really lost it." My heart sank. "What kind of revenge?" "I don't know details. He got weird when I asked, but he's drinking a lot, saying crazy stuff. I just thought you should know." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Jake sighed. "My girlfriend saw that TikTok and went ballistic. She said if I didn't warn you about what Nate's planning, she'd break up with me. And honestly, I've been feeling pretty crappy about the whole Lamborghini thing anyway. It wasn't cool." I thanked him for the warning, genuinely appreciative despite our history. After hanging up, I forwarded Jake's number to Chris with a brief explanation, just in case anything happened to me. It felt dramatic, but I couldn't be too careful. The next day, I found a new apartment across town and paid the deposit immediately. The rent was higher than I could comfortably afford, but it had secure entry with a key fob system, and I wouldn't have to give Nate my new address. I scheduled the move for the following weekend and asked several friends to help, not just for the heavy lifting, but for safety in numbers. As moving day approached, I grew increasingly paranoid, checking my car for tracking devices and varying my route to work. I felt like I was living in a thriller movie, except nothing about this was entertaining. The day before the move, I received another email, this time from an account I didn't recognize. The subject line was "One last joke." There was no message, just an attached video file. Against my better judgment, I clicked play. It was footage of my apartment, my bedroom, my bathroom, my living room. The camera moved through each space slowly, lingering on personal items, photos, jewelry, even my underwear drawer. The video ended with a close-up of my bed, freshly made, with something written on the pillowcase in what looked like red lipstick. "Sweet dreams, Meg." I dropped my phone like it had burned me. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I forwarded the video to the police officer handling my case, then called Chris in tears. "I'm coming to get you right now," he said. "Pack whatever you need for tonight. We're moving your stuff out first thing tomorrow." That night, I barely slept. Every noise made me jump. Chris stayed up with me, making plans for the move and trying to keep my spirits up. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Moving won't save you. I'll always find you." I showed Chris, who immediately called the police. They promised to send an officer to take a statement in the morning, but without a direct threat of physical harm, there wasn't much they could do immediately. "This is insane," I said, pacing Chris's living room. "How is this not threatening enough?" Chris looked grim. "Because the law is stupid sometimes, but we're not waiting for them to help. We're taking matters into our own hands tomorrow." The next morning, a small army arrived at my apartment. Chris, Taylor from work, 3 of my college friends, and even Olivia and Zoe, who I'd only spoken to online until then. With 7 people working together, we emptied my apartment in record time. No one went anywhere alone, and Chris checked each box before it left to make sure nothing had been tampered with. As we were loading the last few items, a car pulled up across the street. Nate was inside, just watching us. "Ignore him," him, Chris advised when I tensed up. That's what he wants, a reaction. But Zoe had other ideas. She marched across the street, phone held up, obviously recording, and approached his car. We couldn't hear what she said, but Nate's expression changed from smug to alarmed. He drove away quickly, tires squealing. What did you say to him? I asked when she returned. Zoe smiled grimly. I told him I was live streaming to my followers and had his license plate, name, and workplace on record. Then I reminded him that 3 women filing individual harassment reports makes a pretty compelling pattern for a restraining order. Was that true? About the live stream? Chris asked. Nope, Zoe admitted, but he doesn't know that. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. Really laughed. It felt good to see Nate retreating for once. The move to my new apartment went smoothly. Everyone helped set up the basic furniture, and Chris installed a serious security system, door sensors, window alarms, and cameras that uploaded footage directly to the cloud. My new place was on the 3rd floor with secure entry to the building that required a key fob, and none of my social media accounts listed my location. That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in my new space feeling a strange mix of emotions. I was still afraid, but also angry, determined, and weirdly hopeful. Nate had tried to isolate me, but instead, he'd inadvertently built me a stronger support network than I'd ever had. The next day, I received a formal letter from the police department. They had reviewed all my reports and evidence and determined there was enough for a temporary restraining order against Nate. I would need to appear before a judge in 2 weeks for the hearing to make it permanent, but for now, he legally had to stay away from me. I forwarded the official documentation to Jordan at Nate's company, thanking her for taking my initial report seriously. Her response came quickly. Thank you for the update. Without breaking confidentiality, I can tell you that Mr. Gardner is no longer employed with our company as of yesterday. I stared at the email in disbelief. Nate had been fired. The company had actually taken action. After months of feeling powerless, things were finally happening. I texted Olivia and Zoe with the news, and we had an impromptu celebration over video chat that night. None of us had wanted revenge exactly. We just wanted to be heard, to be taken seriously, and to protect others from going through what we had. The restraining order seemed to work. For a few days, there was no contact from Nate. I started to relax into my new routine, even ventured out to a movie with Taylor without constantly looking over my shoulder. Then on Friday night, I got a notification from my new security system. Someone was at my door. I checked the camera feed on my phone and felt ice in my veins. Nate was standing outside my apartment, swaying slightly like he was drunk. How had he found my new address? How had he gotten past the building's secure entry? As I looked more closely at the footage, I realized he must have followed someone in when they used their key fob. The building's security was only as good as the vigilance of its residents, and someone had clearly let a stranger in behind them without questioning why he was there. I immediately called 911, whispering that someone with a restraining order against them was at my door. The dispatcher assured me officers were on their way and advised me to stay quiet and away from the door. The longest 10 minutes of my life followed. I watched through the security app as Nate pounded on my door, then tried the handle. It was locked, of course, but knowing how close he was made my heart race. He leaned close to the door and said something the microphone didn't quite catch, then pulled something from his pocket. I squinted at my phone screen, trying to make out what he was holding. It looked like a key. My stomach dropped. The locksmith. Later, I found out from my landlord that Nate had somehow convinced the building's locksmith that he was my boyfriend who had lost his key. He'd shown old photos of us together as proof and paid a hefty fee for an emergency copy. But before he could try it, the building's hallway lights flashed. Someone else was coming. 2 police officers appeared in frame, approaching Nate carefully. He turned, clearly surprised, and shoved whatever he'd been holding back into his pocket. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw him gesturing wildly, then pointing at my door. One officer spoke into his radio while the other kept Nate's attention. After a few minutes, they handcuffed him and led him away. Only then did I release the breath I'd been holding. My phone rang. It was the police, confirming that they had Nate in custody for violating the restraining order. They asked if I would come down to the station to make a statement. Chris drove me there, staying close as I recounted everything that had happened. The officer taking my statement was thorough, asking for copies of all my documentation. When I mentioned the object Nate had pulled from his pocket, they said they would check what was found during processing. What happens now? I asked when we were done. He'll be held at least until arraignment on Monday, the officer explained. Given the restraining order violation and his history of harassment, the judge will likely set bail with conditions, possibly an ankle monitor or at minimum an order to leave the city. I nodded, feeling a complex mix of relief, fear, and sadness. This wasn't how I'd imagined things would end when I first met Nate years ago, bright-eyed and believing he was just a funny, confident guy who liked me. As we were leaving, the officer called me back. We found something interesting in his possession, a keychain with several unmarked keys, and this. He held up a small device in an evidence bag. It's a GPS tracker. Based on your previous reports, we're getting a warrant to check if it matches one that might be on your car or belongings. That explained how he'd found my new address. I'd been careful about my apartment, but I'd been driving my same car. He could have placed a tracker on it any time. The next morning, a police technician checked my car and found the tracker's mate magnetized to my undercarriage. It had likely been there for weeks, silently reporting my movements to Nate's phone. The thought made my skin crawl. With Nate in custody and the tracker removed, I finally felt safe enough to fully unpack my new apartment. As I organized my books onto shelves, my phone buzzed with a text from Jordan, the HR director. I probably shouldn't be sharing this, but thought you should know. Nate listed you as a reference for a new job application that came across my desk from a company asking for verification of employment. I informed them of the circumstances of his departure from our company. I believe they've withdrawn their offer. I sat down hard on my couch, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions. Part of me felt vindicated that his actions were having real consequences for his life. Another part felt strange sadness for the person I'd once thought I loved, whose life was now spiraling because he couldn't stop hurting others. But mostly, I felt strength. I had faced my tormentor, not alone, but with a community community of support I never expected to find. Olivia, Zoe, Chris, Taylor, and even unexpected allies like Jordan and Jake had helped me stand my ground. On Monday, I attended Nate's arraignment. I didn't have to. The prosecutor had enough to move forward without my presence, but I wanted to be there. I needed to see this through. Nate looked small in his orange jumpsuit, nothing like the confident tormentor who had seemed so powerful for so long. When he spotted me in the courtroom, his expression flickered between anger and something that might have been shame. The judge set bail, but with strict conditions: an ankle monitor, surrender of his passport, and an expanded restraining order that covered not just me but also Olivia and Zoe. He was prohibited from contacting any of us in any way, including through third parties. As we left the courthouse, Zoe linked her arm through mine. "You know what the best revenge is, right?" she asked. "Living well and helping others avoid guys like him." I nodded, feeling lighter than I had in months. "I'm thinking of starting a support group," I said, "for people who've experienced this kind of psychological harassment. There must be others out there who feel as alone as I did." "Count me in," Olivia said, joining us on my other side. "We could even build a resource website, share what we've learned about documentation, legal options." We walked arm in arm down the courthouse steps, already planning. The sun was bright, and for the first time in ages, I didn't look over my shoulder once. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be perfectly smooth. The criminal case would take time, and healing from the trauma would take even longer. But I also knew I wasn't alone anymore, and that made all the difference. The last laugh wasn't about humiliating Nate the way he'd humiliated me. It was about reclaiming my power, finding my voice, and using this horrible experience to help others. That was a victory he could never take away from me. I wish I could say that was the end of my Nate saga, but real life isn't that tidy. The next few weeks were actually pretty quiet. The ankle monitor seemed to be doing its job keeping Nate away from me, and I was settling into my new apartment. I'd been sleeping better, not jumping at every noise, and even went out for drinks with Taylor without constantly checking the door. Then one evening, I got a text from an unknown number that just said, "Check your email." Against my better judgment, I did. There was a message from a new email address with the subject line, "Last warning." Inside was a link to a private Instagram account. I hesitated, knowing it was probably a trap, but curiosity got the better of me. The account had just one post, a photo of me entering my new apartment building, clearly taken that morning. The caption read, "Ankle monitors come off eventually." My hands started shaking so bad I could barely call Chris. He came over right away and helped me file yet another police report. The officer who took my statement seemed genuinely concerned, but admitted there wasn't much they could do since the message itself wasn't explicitly threatening. "How is a stalker photographing me at my new home not threatening?" I asked, my voice cracking. The officer looked sympathetic. "I get it, I really do, but the system has limitations. Keep documenting everything." After he left, I sat on my couch feeling trapped again. "I can't live like this," I told Chris, always looking over my shoulder, wondering when he'll pop up next. "You don't have to," Chris said. "Remember that support group idea you mentioned? Maybe it's time to make that happen." The next day, I reached out to Olivia and Zoe about creating that resource website we discussed outside the courthouse. They were both immediately on board. Olivia even knew a web designer who would help us pro bono after hearing our story. Within 2 weeks, we had a basic site up with information about documenting harassment, legal options, and mental health resources. We called it The Last Laugh, as a small nod to where this all started. We shared our stories anonymously and invited others to do the same. I poured myself into the project, working on it every evening after my day job. It gave me purpose and distracted me from constantly worrying about Nate. I'd check my security cameras less obsessively and stopped expecting to see his face around every corner. Then one day, I got an email notification that someone had submitted their story to our website. The details made my blood run cold. It described a relationship with a man who used pranks to humiliate his girlfriend, including pretending to cheat on her birthday. The writing style was unmistakable. It was Nate, pretending to be one of his victims, mocking our entire project. I immediately forwarded it to our police contact, who confirmed it violated the restraining order. They picked Nate up that afternoon for questioning. I felt a surge of satisfaction when I heard he'd spent the night in jail before making bail again. The judge was less lenient this time, extending his ankle monitor requirement and adding additional restrictions. But the most surprising development came from Jordan at HR, who called me a few days later. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this," she said, "but I thought you should know." After Nate's second arrest, we received calls from 3 other women who worked with him at previous companies. They all described similar harassment patterns. My heart sank. "How many people has he done this to?" "That's why I'm calling," Jordan continued. "His former supervisor wants to talk to you. They're considering filing a corporate statement to support the case against him." I agreed to the meeting, which turned out to be with Thomas, a VP who had hired Nate at his previous job. Thomas explained that after hearing about the restraining order and arrests, he'd conducted internal interviews and discovered Nate had harassed multiple colleagues. "We missed the pattern because the incident seemed minor in isolation, and the women didn't know about each other," Thomas explained. "I'm sorry we didn't catch this sooner." Thomas offered to provide official documentation of the workplace incidents to the prosecutor handling Nate's case. It wasn't much, but it helped establish a pattern of behavior that went beyond just me, Olivia, and Zoe. That night, I updated our website with a new resource page about recognizing patterns of workplace harassment. As I was finishing up, I got a text from Taylor with a screenshot of Nate's LinkedIn profile. He'd updated it to show he was moving to Seattle for a fresh start at a new company. I felt a confusing mix of relief and concern. Relief that he might finally be out of my life, but concern for whoever he might target next. I forwarded the information to our police contact, who confirmed that Nate's bail conditions would make it difficult for him to leave the state before his court date, but not impossible if the new company was helping with relocation. The next morning, I made a decision. I called the number listed on the Seattle company's website and asked to speak to their HR department. The woman who answered introduced herself as Mary. "This is uncomfortable," I started, "but I need to inform you about a potential new hire named Nate Gardner." There was a pause. "Go on." I took a deep breath and gave her the facts. Just the facts. The restraining order, the arrests, the pattern of harassment documented by multiple women and companies. I didn't embellish or let emotion creep in. I simply laid out the evidence and suggested they might want to conduct additional due diligence before bringing him on board. Mary thanked me for the information and said they would look into it. I hung up feeling like I'd done what I could to protect potential future victims without crossing any lines. 3 days later, I received an email from Mary confirming they had rescinded Nate's job offer after verifying my information with his former employers. She thanked me for having the courage to come forward. That same evening, my doorbell rang. I checked the camera and saw a police officer standing there. My heart raced as I opened the door. "I'm Officer Williams. We need to talk about Nathan Gardner." I invited him in, bracing for bad news. But what he told me wasn't what I expected. Mr. Gardner was picked up this morning trying to remove his ankle monitor. During processing, we found evidence on his phone of multiple harassment campaigns against several women, including yourself. The district attorney is upgrading the charges to include stalking and cybercrime offenses. I sat down hard on my couch. So what happens now? He's being held without bail pending trial. Given the evidence and his attempt to flee, the judge doesn't consider him a good candidate for release. For the first time in months, I felt a weight lift completely off my shoulders. Nate was actually facing serious consequences. The officer left me his card and told me the DA would be in touch about testifying. I immediately called Olivia and Zoe to share the news. We ended up having an impromptu celebration via video chat, all of us processing this unexpected development. "I can't believe it's really over," I said, still in shock. "It's not just over," Zoe pointed out. "He's actually being held accountable." That's rare. She was right. So many harassment victims never get that closure. It made our website feel even more important. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Our little resource site was gaining traction, with women from across the country submitting their stories and thanking us for creating a space where they felt understood. We added forums, connected with legal resources, and even started weekly virtual support meetings. The DA's office kept me updated on Nate's case. The evidence from his phone was damning. He had detailed notes on each of his targets, including schedules, vulnerabilities, and prank ideas. There were women I'd never heard of in his files, going back years. One morning, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Jake, Nate's friend from the Lamborghini video. "Hey, I know we're not friends or anything," he started awkwardly, "but I wanted to apologize for my part in all this. I didn't know how bad it was. I was silent, not sure how to respond. Anyway," he continued, "I've been talking to the DA, telling them everything I know about Nate's jokes. I should have done it sooner." "Why now?" I asked. "My sister found your website. She recognized Nate from some of the anonymous stories. She showed me, and it was like seeing everything clearly for the first time." He paused. "I was a terrible person for going along with his crap. I'm sorry." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it felt genuine, and it showed our website was making a difference in unexpected ways. The day before Nate's pretrial hearing, I got another surprising call, this time from Richard, Nate's father. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. "Meg, I don't know what to say except I'm sorry," he began. "We never realized how serious Nate's behavior was. We always thought he was just high-spirited playing jokes." I remained silent, letting him talk. "His mother and I have been reading the case files. The things he did to you and those other women," his voice broke. "We failed as parents. We failed to teach him respect." I finally spoke. "What do you want from me, Richard?" "Nothing. You don't owe us anything. I just wanted you to know we're not contesting anything. We won't be paying for expensive lawyers to get him off. He needs to face consequences." After we hung up, I sat in my living room feeling strangely empty. There was no satisfaction in knowing Nate's parents were suffering too. This whole situation was just sad. Sad that so many people had been hurt. Sad that warning signs had been missed for years. Sad that someone with so much potential had chosen to use his intelligence to cause pain, rather than contribute something positive. The day of the hearing arrived. I dressed carefully in a simple blue dress and met Olivia and Zoe outside the courthouse. We had agreed to attend together, supporting each other through whatever happened. Inside, I was surprised by how many people were there. Jordan from HR, Thomas from Nate's old company, even Jake sitting awkwardly in the back. The DA had told me they had a strong case, but seeing the physical manifestation of all the evidence and witnesses was powerful. Nate looked awful when they brought him in, pale and thinner than I remembered. He didn't look at anyone, keeping his eyes fixed on the table in front of him. The proceedings were brief. His attorney announced they were seeking a plea deal, and the judge set another date for that discussion. Outside the courthouse, a reporter from the local paper approached us, asking for a statement about the case. I hesitated, then decided to speak. "This isn't about revenge," I said carefully. "It's about accountability and protecting others. We started the Last Laugh website to help people recognize the warning signs we missed and find resources we didn't know existed. That's the only statement I want to make." 2 weeks later, I received official notification that Nate had accepted a plea deal. 3 years with possibility of parole after 18 months, mandatory counseling, and a permanent restraining order against contacting me, Olivia, Zoe, or any of his other documented victims. It was over. Really over. Not with a dramatic confrontation or a perfect movie ending, but with paperwork and legal proceedings and a quiet acknowledgement of harm done. That night, I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, thinking about everything that had happened. My phone buzzed with a notification. Our website had just reached 10,000 visitors. We were helping people. Something good had come from all this pain. I scrolled through some of the anonymous thank you messages we'd received. I thought I was crazy until I found your site. You gave me the courage to file my police report. Reading other women's stories made me feel less alone. These weren't just words on a screen. They were real people finding their own way to the last laugh, not through revenge or cruelty, but through connection, support, and the power of shared experience. I put my phone down and looked out at the city lights coming on as darkness fell. For the first time in ages, I didn't check my security camera before heading to bed. I didn't double check my locks or look under my car for tracking devices. I just went inside, made some tea, and started planning the next phase of our website expansion. The last laugh wasn't a moment. It was this whole new life I was building. A life where Nate's power over me was finally, completely gone, and that felt better than any revenge could have.